Awesome. So welcome everyone to an AMA with Agoric here. I am JK, heading strategy and operations at Stakefish. Today we have Rowland here. He's going to talk to us about a bit about Agoric. And then I'll have a lot of questions around the incentivized testnet that they are conducting today, and then wrap up with some questions around their recent beta launch, and then also what's next for Agoric. We're super excited to have them, to have Rowland here. So yeah, without further ado, just wanted to throw it right away at you, Roland. Can you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, JK. Hi, everybody, and thank you, Stakefish, for having us on. Really happy to be here today. So, as JK mentioned, I'm Rowland. I'm product at Agoric, and depends on how long an introduction you want. But in terms of my entrance to the crypto world, I'm part of the 2017 cohort. I come into product from the economics and business side of things. So I got my start of my career doing private equity due diligence for large transactions in the PE space, and then decided I really didn't like that and moved towards more of a startup kind of role. And I gravitate towards product just because it's a great way to succeed as a generalist in a world that otherwise requires a lot of specialty and a lot of expertise. So coming into product roles at various startups doing enterprise SaaS, and now moving into what I really like, which is working on complex systems, and blockchain is the best place to be for that. So was happy to join Agoric late last fall.
Awesome. Well, then can you then introduce us to Agoric?
Yeah, of course. So Agoric, and just as a short introduction, Agoric is launching a public blockchain this year, and it will rapidly become the best place to build DeFi products. So that is about as short an introduction as I can give. I'm sure we'll get into more details later.
Yes, indeed. So like Agoric, I mean, we've seen Agoric being developed for quite a long time. So can you tell us about its roots, about when it started, for the people who might not be not aware?
Sure. And it's always a difficult question to answer because the company was founded in 2018, but really it builds on decades of work from our founders. So in 1988, Mark Miller wrote co-authored the Agoric Open Systems papers, which have become sort of part of the canon for the history of smart contracts. And Dean and Bill and various other people at the company have all worked together over the past few decades on different aspects of this technology, both in an academic setting, but also in building them in production systems. And so it's sort of been this decades-long quest, and in my view, sort of culminating in what we're doing now, which is launching the blockchain that kind of brings all of this together. So it's been several decades in planning here.
Yeah, and so one of the, I think, so the key features of Agoric blockchain is going to be supporting smart contracts, and as you mentioned, you foresee a ton of DeFi applications being built on Agoric. Can you explain to us, as summarized as possible, because I know you could go into very nitty-gritty
Yeah.
detail, but what makes Agoric's smart contract platform different from the other ones that are out there in the market today?
Yeah, of course. So thinking about this question, we have a lot of differentiators, and what we've started to realize is that you can kind of package all of them into, what we're sort of using as our tagline now, which is build fast and earn fast. And really, what that means is, as a developer, you have a lot of benefits building in Agoric. The first is you're building smart contracts in JavaScript, so no need to learn a new language. You can use the tools that you're familiar with. You can, and this is a point that isn't actually brought up very much, but you can actually hire as as your product expands and you need to bring more people into your organization. You're able to find people easily because you're building smart contracts in JavaScript. And then beyond that, we integrate security sort of in multiple levels of the system. So in the language itself, so we use a secure subset of JavaScript, and we have a protocol for assets, the electronic rights transfer protocol, which has security built in. Zoe, our transfer or our transactional framework, and again, I'm glossing over what it could be a whole lot of detail here, has security built in to make sure that atomic transactions happen and are secured at the protocol level. And so as a developer, what that really adds up to is you have a lot of ways in which your speed is increased because you don't have to worry about security as much as you would have otherwise. And what I like to say is security basically means speed to market. The thing that security also enables is fine-grained composability. So we often contrast to Ethereum, where what composability, at least the way I take composability in Ethereum, is you have different protocols that call each other's functions occasionally. But when people are copying code, they really are copy pasting code, right? The Sushi copying Uniswap. If you look through Sushi's code, it says Uniswap everywhere. And really, that's not the way we want to deal with code reuse and with developers building on top of each other. And what Agoric allows, in part because of the built-in security, allowing developers to reason about things, but we allow this very fine-grained level of composability where you can import specific modules and things like that the way you're used to when you develop. So again, that all adds up to building faster too, right? You have more components to build with, more fine-grained components to build with, and you're not copy-pasting code. And post all of those things, we're also allowing you to launch in an integrated economy. So in Agoric, you'll have a stable local currency that we use in the economy. There are protocol level DeFi applications. So and again, we have some talks on our economy, and I won't go into too much detail here, but within the actual Agoric system, there are reward flows based on that. And then we also have native connections to the outside world. So, whether that's IBC to other Cosmos chains, Ethereum, et cetera, we're launching with all of those things in mind. So really, as a developer, this should be the best place for you to go to build quickly, be able to hire, launch in an environment where you've got funds and data coming into you natively. So we're really excited.
That's very interesting. So there's a ton of sort of already available tools and sort of some applications like local stable coins natively implemented on the protocol level.
Yes.
And so you don't need to wait for that level of composability where other teams or other applications are potentially building that up, and you're just waiting until that's sort of deployed on Agoric. That's very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just mentioned Cosmos here, IBC, and so people might, for those who are unaware, Agoric is built on Cosmos SDK, and I was wondering if you could briefly touch on what sort of the reasoning was on behind choosing the Cosmos SDK.
Sure. And so this decision did happen at Agoric prior to me joining, but the way I really see it is there was a huge alignment between the Agoric team and the folks from Cosmos that we met, and the vision behind IBC, I think really did jive with the way Agoric was thinking about distributed communication. And actually a number of the Agoric folks were part of that design conversation in a serious way. So I think there really just was a great alignment there. I think at some level, the Agoric system is consensus agnostic, and we could have built on Substrate or something like that. And we chose Cosmos for that alignment, and also just because we believe that technically it was the right decision at the time. So yeah.
Gotcha. And you mentioned your Agoric will be connected through IBC through two other Cosmos hubs and zones, and then you have you mentioned a connection to Ethereum as well. I was curious, what sort of assets or applications do you really are looking forward to connecting to Agoric?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think by the time Agoric mainnet launches, really, there already is a large and growing Cosmos ecosystem. And I think personally, I am excited about being a hub and a place for those assets and connections in general to flow in. So I think every chain launching will have a connection to Ethereum. You have to, and it's something that there's a lot of liquidity there. And I think that that will of course be an important thing for us, and important things for developers building on us as well. But really, I think that the Cosmos ecosystem, as it grows throughout the year, with IBC launching, it's so exciting the way it's going to take off. Personally, I think that's going to be very quickly the more interesting connection set.
Gotcha. Yeah, we're really looking forward to that, as well as Cosmos Hub validators. And to wrap up sort of like the Agoric portion of the questions here, I wanted to ask, like, what are some of the use cases for Agoric you see? I mean, you mentioned the DeFi, but I'm curious, like, there has to be other applications that you're thinking of.
Yeah, and so because we're launching a public chain, I think there's a lot of stuff that you're used to seeing that will also be a use case on Agoric, and we think that we just frankly do it better. But then beyond that, I think as you start to dig into the real tech behind Agoric, it really is about secure distributed communication between protocols and having seamless communication between off-chain and on-chain assets, and a solo machine running in an enterprise setting, and again, written in JavaScript, which is a much more accessible thing for them. You start to see these applications that people have hoped for public blockchains to come online, since I've been tracking it 4 or 5 years ago. I think that we will start to enable some of those applications, and the exciting thing is we're not quite sure exactly what that will mean yet. We have ideas internally, but I think what's going to be most interesting is something coming out of the blue from a developer set that says this is the best tech for what we want, and suddenly, just sort of like DeFi, it all of a sudden is a giant thing. So yeah, I think there's more to that question, but really that connection to off-chain assets and off-chain activity is going to be interesting.
Gotcha. I do want to clarify here a bit. I do want to ask a clarification question. When you say like off-chain sort of connection, are you like referring to on-ramps, or are you referring to oracles?
And the way I'm thinking about it is, as an example, and this is I think last summer we built out an example idea of an OTC desk talking to an on-chain DEX, right? And the OTC desk is providing quotes, and what Agoric allows is for you not to need to trust the OTC desk at all, right? There's a communication protocol between that off-chain activity, and asset is the wrong thing, but that off-chain process and the on-chain process with the security of the transaction through our Zoe framework layer that allows that communication and that exchange to happen in a way that has the security of the blockchain itself, but is accessible to off-chain folks. So I'm really not necessarily talking about an oracle or an on-ramp. I guess it's more in the on-ramp category. That said, we also will have oracle connections. We integrated with Chainlink already, and then we're speaking with fiat on-ramps as well. So those things exist too. But yeah, I'm talking more about just the kinds of applications that can get built when you're assuming that there's a lot of off-chain activity happening as well.
Gotcha. That's very interesting. Thank you for the example. That really clarified sort of what sort of framework you're thinking about. Yeah, so let's then dive into the incentivized testnet. And this is sort of the big development that I think a lot of people have been looking forward to. As I mentioned, we've had our eyes on the Agoric. Like, we've been very much aware that this team has been building for a very long time, has a very keen focus on trying to onboard developers using JavaScript to build smart contracts. I mean, this has been sort of one of the key sort of barriers to entry for some new developers who need to just like learn new smart contract languages just to basically write anything. But we've been always calling out like, oh, when mainnet, when are things going to actually happen? And then all of a sudden, Agoric's dropped the incentivized testnet, which for a lot of teams, this really means like, oh, we're here, like we're at the last home stretch, we're ready. We have only like 1 to 3 months maybe before we actually launch, and this really got us excited. So I wanted to like dive a little deeper into the incentivized testnet that is ongoing right now. Dive into it, get some answers on this with Rowland here. So yeah, Roland, can you give us a high-level overview of Agoric's Incentivized testnet?
Sure. And obviously you guys know this, but for those of you watching, the incentivized testnet Agoric it has 5 phases, and we've spaced it out so that the phases are structured so that they're roughly 1 week on and then 2 weeks off in between. And the result of that is that it actually does take up several months. But the goal on our side was to not only make sure that we have time to learn between the phases. So, the whole goal of the incentivized testnet is to understand how things might operate in a production like environment and to test new software. So we built in the understanding that we might need to adjust in between. We likely will. And so as a result, it will take several months. The phases ramp up in terms of difficulty, both in terms of what we're asking validators to do, but what we're doing on our side as well, and the kinds of things that we're trying to learn. And then also in terms of points earned. So there isn't necessarily a clear linear ramp, but that is sort of roughly how it's structured. And obviously there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're assessing, and I think we'll probably get into it. So that high level is the overview of the testnet.
Awesome. Yeah. So what are the key goals of this testnet then?
Yeah. So obviously we want to test the system itself, right? So we need to see how it performs under strain, different kinds of strain based on Agoric's smart contract structure and how we expect things to operate in production. So that's part of it. We want to see how the validator group interacts, and because this is a decentralized system, right? So we want to understand how people are able to work together, and then to the extent we can help train and prepare the group to do that well. And then the last part also is just growing the community. So, as you mentioned, I think you, along with a lot of other people, have been watching Agoric for a while, kind of wondering when mainnet, when testnet, that sort of thing. And but now that we actually are moving towards that in a very rapid way, we want to make sure that the community is able to grow and is able to grow in a healthy manner, is able to help each other. And we've already seen a lot of that happening, which has been great.
Gotcha. Understood. And I want to take a short time here just to like really comment about how like well prepared Agoric's incentivized testnet seemed right off the bat. You guys had an entire sort of like a web page dedicated just to explain all the details, nitty gritty, what sort of challenges people should be expecting, what sort of phases there are, timeline, FAQs. I mean, quite honestly, this has been one of the most professional incentivized testnet we've have seen almost likely ever. So I was curious, like, how much preparation went into this testnet?
So again, that's really great to hear, and we appreciate you saying that. I think, of course, I'm on the video here talking about it, but really, there's been a lot of people at Agoric that have built this. So in particular, Santi from marketing, Vanessa from business development, and the engineering team as well. So a lot of preparation did go into it. We also have had the benefit of being able to learn from other people that have run incentivized testnet. So we've had a number of conversations with Cosmos people, learning the lessons that they learned. And the one thing that we heard over and over again was you cannot over communicate. So we have tried to be as clear as we can. And I think regardless, we'll still learn through part of this. But that has been our goal, and it's great to hear that so far that's been the response.
I mean, awesome. Like, so yeah, I was gonna ask what sort of other incentivized testnets have inspired you, and it seems like Cosmos Hub has already inspired you to like try to make sure that you over communicate. Are there any other lessons that you've picked up from looking into other incentivized testnets?
Yeah, I think and of course the test nets specifically were Game of Stakes and Game of Zones from Cosmos, that we really had the most input from. But it went from anything as broad as over communicate to specific things around how to structure tasks and how to structure challenges, what kinds of things to be looking for, how to test our system. So it really was the level of input that we got and help that we got from the community was amazing. So Yeah, yeah, it's several multi-hour long calls, so it's too much to convey here. But really, just almost all aspects of it was helpful.
Gotcha. And then,
And it's
oh, go
also,
ahead. Yeah.
and sorry, it's also worth noting that we learned a lot too from speaking with validators, right? So a number of validators in our community have given us input on things that have been helpful for them, and things that didn't work well in previous test nets, so that we could try to learn from that experience too, and that's been really useful.
Yeah, and it really shows, because there were definitely a few incentivized test nets where validators have consistently asked a ton of questions on like, there's not enough documentations. How are we supposed to like really compete? There were some like guidelines that were lacking in some cases, and you guys have like basically made sure that those sort of holes are all like plugged in. You guys have great documentation around that. Really glad to see sort of you guys setting a new standard on this front. So, what were some of the difficulties, challenges while you were that you faced while putting this testnet together?
Yeah. So I think the one obvious one was, we had a lot more applications than we expected. So I think if you go back to the community call where I was announcing the incentivized testnet, I said a couple times, well, we may be oversubscribed, and then it turned out that we were like 20x oversubscribed, or I think my math is off. It's considerably more than that, maybe. And that was a little bit of a challenge, right? Because now all of a sudden we're in a position where we have to reject people that are extremely qualified, and based on a very little time to review, and so that was challenging. And then I think the rest of it really is, I think of it a little bit as similar to planning a wedding, where you kind of like have the big pieces figured out, but then when it gets down to the couple days before, it's like, oh, there's all these little details that need to need to kind of work out, and I didn't think hard enough about them before. And that's just something that with any big event, it's always going to happen. And so there was no specific lessons, I think, that we learned from that, more just that had to come together. But yeah, I think the big unexpected one was just the number of applications, and how to approach that in a way that didn't make the community feel like we were neglecting them. And I think some people probably did that feel that way, and there was really, we tried to avoid that as much as we could. But when you can only accept 5% of the people in, that's tough.
Yeah, can you cover like so how many applications you guys were accepting? Sort of some numbers around that.
Yeah, I mean, we accepted all the applications that came through, but only 150 were selected to be part of the test net. We did have a wait list, and we had 6,000 plus applications. So that was tough, and to the extent we could tell, it wasn't mostly bots, right? These were for the most part real people, and that was sort of something that nobody that we had talked to before, that had given us input, had seen before. So part of me wonders whether that's the space has matured and people are more used to incentivized test nets, and there's just more competition if you're a validator, which is interesting in its own right. Or if there were just a lot of people waiting for ours in particular, and it could be some combination of those.
Gotcha. And what was some of the region breakdown you saw of those like 6,000 applications?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was definitely global, obviously. I think there were, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was a lot of Eastern Europe. There were a lot from, I mean, there were a lot from everywhere because of 6,000.
Of
But
course.
yeah, I mean, it was very global.
And this might be a bit of a weird question, but I think it was asked somewhere. Some maybe validators and some applicants might be interested, but like, what was the reasoning for conducting KYC AML for the incentivized testnet?
Yeah, I mean, the reason is pretty straightforward. We are a U.S. company, and if we are giving out rewards, we are obligated to do that, and that's that's the answer. I think that it's important to know that as Agoric goes to mainnet, it will be permissionless to be a validator, and that you know, as a decentralized chain, we won't be in charge of who's a validator or not. That
Gotcha.
will be
But
the
cert
the market and the community. Yeah.
Gotcha. But I mean, certainly, participating in incentivized testnet will give you a leg up once Agoric mainnet comes around. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that you will have gone through all of these phases, you will sort of have the benefit of the experience here. You'll have gotten to know the other validators. Yeah.
Gotcha. And you mentioned the 5 phases of the incentivized testnet. I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, which phase are you most excited for? Like, actually, can you start us off with like a brief overview of like each phase, and then like explain like which phase you're most excited for?
Sure. So the phase that we just finished, or rather, we finished the first phase already, and we are actually right on the cusp of starting the second phase. The first phase really was just kind of turn on your validator, right? It was onboarding, it was making sure that we got the steps down to submit tasks and things like that. And that was the easiest phase by far. We're now moving into the infrastructure phase, which is uh, the way I view it is it's the first initial load that we're trying to put on the system, and we're starting to do some things a little bit more decentralized, like having the validator start the Genesis block and things like that. Um, there will really be minimal load there. The phase after that is staking dynamics. So making sure that you're able to receive delegations and get slashed and things like that. So really important stuff for the economic security of the system. Then we have what we're calling the stress test, which I think is sort of similar to infrastructure, except that that's where real load is going to get put onto the system, and we're going to start having harder challenges. And then the last phase is the adversarial testnet, and that's really, can we break it, right? You know, there will be there will be rewards for well, all sorts of related malicious things that you might be able to do to the chain. But I think for me, and this is going to be a weird answer, but I'm most excited for the stress test phase, which is the fourth phase, because I think that that's where we're going to really put, you know, as a team building a blockchain. And obviously I'm not the one doing the deep engineering around, you know, performance and things like that, but I'm really interested in it, and putting the load on the chain and seeing how it performs, making sure that validators are able to manage an emergency restart, things like that, you know, putting us through our paces in terms of a difficult production environment. That's where it's going to really start feeling real. I think that this is, you know, this is going to be a public blockchain soon, and I'm excited to see that. I think
Gotcha.
most people would probably say adversarial, but you know, that's
But mostly, so the stress test phase basically.
yep.
Um, does that mean also then would that phase the stress test part phase be where validators can win the most points?
So the point structures are based on the type of task. So we have some competitive tasks in, and I think we're calling them challenge tasks in the testnet. And those, you know, realistically, if there are challenge tasks that only a couple people can win, and you win one of those, that's going to be a probably the largest amount of points that you can get. Um, the other tasks, though, are we have community tasks, which are more like write something about your experience or tweet something about your experience, and then network tasks, which are actually do the activity that we need from you. And so those tasks, the network and community tasks, increase in value over the course of the test net, or at least the network ones do. So I think in the stress test, you will have a bunch of network tasks that are more valuable than the previous ones have been. The adversarial testnet will probably, and I think that there's a little bit still to be determined here, but I think those will primarily be challenge tasks. And you know, it may be that very few points get awarded there if no one is able to successfully defeat something. And I think part of that is that we are still, you know, as we see the testnet evolve, our thinking on the tasks themselves evolve. So some of those later phases, we're seeing how the first few phases go before we determine exactly how they'll be structured.
Gotcha, understood. So how can participating validators gain an edge? Are there like any tips or advice you could give?
Yeah. So I guess obviously I can't give guidance on specific tasks. This would be a very biased answer. But I think there's two things. One is learn a little bit about how our smart contract platform works, because that may be a way to understand, especially an adversarial testnet, how you might get an advantage to do something. And I think it couldn't hurt regardless. But then beyond that, what I always say is just be active in the community, right? I think this may not matter as much for the incentivized testnet, but for the actual business of being a validator, where you need community delegations and you need support from the community itself. Be active, help others, make sure that people are able to get set up. You don't really gain anything from keeping other people from accomplishing their network tasks. So there's no reason to withhold information, for your own personal benefit, but also just being a good community member will help you build that business later on and get the delegations that you want to have as a successful validator in the system later on.
Gotcha. I think you've touched on a few great points, and we should definitely make a highlight of that about how being active in the community is definitely a way to stand out as like a star validator. Um, so, what type of validators are you expecting to perform well, or like, because I know you don't you wouldn't want to like name out, I guess, names of validators, but like I'm curious, like what type of validators you're expecting to perform.
Yeah, and I think that we're working with a number of groups. I'm sure you guys are going to do great. No, we're working with a number of groups that have serious validator experience before, and obviously we sort of expect them to do well and also give us input as the testnet moves forward. But I think that I think there's a lot of individuals potentially that have the right kind of skills and experience, and I'm excited to see how they do. Right? If this, and again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think most people have at least one other testnet or one other mainnet under their belt. But if you're a less experienced validator, it it doesn't mean that you won't perform really well. As this business gets more competitive and has more people involved, it's great to see it decentralized this way. And I'm excited to see someone come out of the blue and win a challenge task or something like that.
Indeed, indeed. Like it's great when there's like a very dedicated community validator that just like shines and just, blows everyone away. Even most of the other like validators that have been like ours that have been on multiple blockchains. I think those community validators are the ones that like really, really stand out. I'm personally looking forward to this as well. Um, and just wanted to comment also, like, so for some of the recent blockchains, definitely there's always on the top mainnet validator list. There's always the community validators that are in the top 10 these days, and it's been
Mhm.
consistently happening. And so I'm fully expecting someone really to shine brightly here on Agoric as well. Um, Now, this is a question definitely don't want to hear, but still going to ask anyway. But under what circumstances would you delay or like entirely halt the incentivized test and say like, hey, we need some time here?
Right. Yeah, I mean, so obviously, as you say, we hope that doesn't happen. And in part, the buffer between the phases is a way for us to help avoid that. But to answer the question, I think if there was a significant engineering delay for some critical piece of functionality for a specific phase, that could potentially cause that. I think we may see schedules shift around by single digit days one way or the other. Well, never forward, probably back, if we need to, just around things like that. But um, it would either be a significant engineering delay or a major unexpected outcome from some phase. So again, the goal of the testnet is to learn where the breakpoints in the system are, and if we find some that we didn't expect and that are more serious than we thought there could be, then that would cause that. So at the end of the day, this is a software project, and we hope to avoid any delays to the extent we can, but we know that they may happen.
Gotcha, understood. And yeah, it's weird because yeah, at the same time you don't want that to happen. But if it does happen, you're thinking like, "Who, great! It happened not like on the testnet and not on the mainnet."
Exactly. And actually, to that point, there's maybe one other category, which is um, we suddenly realize that there is a major important test that wasn't part of our existing phases that we hadn't planned
Mm.
for, and maybe we need to integrate some additional engineering to build and prepare for that test, and we want it to happen within the testnet umbrella. That could cause that as well. And whether, realistically, in most cases, that would get integrated into an existing phase. That's kind of already happened once. But depending on what it was, that could be another reason.
That's very interesting. Gotcha. Um, what are the expected outcomes? Like, what would make you say conclude that this incentivized testnet was successful?
So no major significant delays would be great. No, I think that each phase has its own goal, and those goals add up to our general goals of the things that we want to evaluate as part of this test net. So I think we can break down success to the success of each phase, and I want to make sure. I, I think one possible failure mode is just lack of communication between validators, or effective communication between us and the validators. So um, not having any major failures there, I think, is really important to me, and would help constitute success. But beyond that, we need to test performance, and making sure that we get enough data to have an answer is success. And performance failing what we wanted isn't necessarily an unsuccessful test net. I think not getting the data to know whether it failed, that would be. So I think that's how I'm thinking about it, at least.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks for that take. And then, so let's talk about like some of the prizes here. It is an incentivized testnet, and I'm quite
Yes.
sure some validators and community members are very keen on trying to learn more about what sort of prizes they can win. So yeah, what are the incentivized here for the participating validators?
Yeah. So the incentives are uh, eventual token rewards on mainnet. And as we kind of mentioned early, when we announced it, it was a little over 1 million tokens are allocated to this, and that is 0.1% of the network, I believe, if my math is right, which I think it is. So, and that is how we are allocating rewards. And there is, points have some tie to tokens, or to the rewards themselves, and so that's how we're thinking about that.
Gotcha. So, but the exact, I'm guessing, ratio hasn't been determined on how that converts yet.
Yeah, that's right. And it's less about. I think we want to see how the test net evolves, and make sure that there isn't any strange imbalance or something like that. But yeah, and that's why there's a little bit of not indirection, but just, yeah, between points and rewards. Yes.
Gotcha. And so will all validators be receiving a reward? Like, is there like an ideal breakdown of like what the reward distribution would look like?
Yeah, I think we've structured it so that most you could get through the test net without completing any challenge tasks, which are the competitive ones, and still have a reasonable reward waiting for you at the end, right? That would be doing the community stuff, making sure that you are. If you're not completing the network tasks, which are the ones like turn on your validator and connect us to Prometheus so that we can see the data flowing through, or as the challenge gets further on, making sure that you have significant uptime during the phases we need. Um, if you're not completing those, you probably won't have any real significant rewards. But that's also the core of what being in this testnet actually means. So I think that kind of works itself out. But you shouldn't have to need to win challenge tasks to have a reward that is meaningful to you at the end.
Gotcha. Understood. Um, and so, we're going to try to wrap up some of the question around incentivized test, and I'm curious, like, going through all of this, do you have any advice, any future like, words for any future protocols that will be putting together incentivized testnet of their own?
So I would say two things to that, two caveats to whatever answer I give. One, I should answer afterwards. So we should go through all the phases and then give advice. And then the second being, I think because a lot of the planning was such a team effort, I think that different team members here would have different things to say. I think for me, and this shouldn't be new information for someone planning an incentivized testnet, but thinking about the anyone that is a validator or wants to be a validator as an important community member is just really important and needs to be front and center in your mind. And we hope we did that, but I think that still ends up driving a lot of decisions around how points or rewards get allocated, about communication styles and things like that just help the testnet come together in the right way. So that's the advice that I would give.
Gotcha, understood. Yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to the wrap up post that will eventually come out after this is all ends, and see like how the answer evolves definitely.
Mhm.
So what's next after the incentivized testnet? What are some of the roadmap? What's on the roadmap for you afterwards?
Sure. And so the incentivized testnet, because it's lasting a couple months, that's a significant thing that we're doing. But we also released our beta last week, which is that was the first initial deployed version of our treasury applications, which includes an AMM and a vault system, which mints our stable local currency. And the other major thread that we have going on is iteration on those things. So, well, I should say there's probably a third thread, which is iteration on developer experience related things that may be separate from both the testnet and the beta itself. But I think for anyone that's interested in the Agoric chain and the possibilities coming down the line, take a look at what we released for beta. It's enough to play with it, to dig under the hood and take a look at the code so that you can understand, these are DeFi contracts and applications built in JavaScript on the Agoric platform, and you can see how we've done it. So I think starting to iterate on those, building out the additional mechanics that we expect to have in the economy, starting to make things in our AMM pluggable so that, for example, you may not want an XYK curve, you may want a stable swap kind of curve. Those sorts of things are really the next things that we're looking to do as well. So we have, just like we have different phases of the incentivized testnet, we'll have additional phases of our beta, which will have additional layered functionality, integrations with wallets, so you don't have to launch from Docker, that sort of thing. So we're really excited about all the work that's going on there as well. And frankly, it's going to be a really busy spring and summer at Agoric. We've got a lot coming. Yeah, I think that's primarily it. And then obviously we are still targeting mainnet in the summer. So if I had to say what are the things to look forward to, it's additional testnet phases, additional beta phases, and then mainnet.
Gotcha. And so will beta just be something that goes on until mainnet, or will beta be consistently running in the background, sort of as like a testnet or a framework for Agoric?
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly, but our plan for beta is multiple phases of release. It will continue running. We may choose to, for whatever reason, we may choose to shut it down and bring it back up. But the plan as of right now is that will be running on our DevNet, which is our other testnet, and we'll continuously, whenever we have a release, we'll push we'll push the new version to DevNet, and we'll have new stuff to play with. But then we'll also have groups of releases that sort of constitute a phase that we can say coherently, okay, here's the new functionality, here's what you can come play with now. And if you're a developer, I guess I really do want to stress, we have mainnet coming, and mainnet will be phased as well, but beta is ready for you to come develop on, right? So if you're looking to build something on Agoric, if you're a JavaScript developer that's interested in DeFi in general, blockchain more, or building a smart contract system, a decentralized app of any kind, come start building on us and asking us questions, and be in a position to, when we launch and when we allow permissionless permissionless deployment, that you're ready to go and that you understand the system. And we're at a time now where team is around and available to help and looking for input. So please do come build on us if you're a developer. And as beta improves, not only will you see our examples improve for what can get built and what will be in the economy, but you'll see the developer experience improve too. So would love to start seeing people come into our Discord.
Awesome. So any developer out there definitely should just check out Agoric beta. Doesn't hurt just to just to experiment, do whatever you want on with regarding smart contracts, especially because you can write this all in JavaScript. So which I believe has the most developers would know how to write in JavaScript basically. So this sounds great. I am still. This is a very specific question of mine, just because it just consistently piques my interest on the capability of minting stable local currency. And does this mean you could mint this using by locking up real world fiat, or are we talking about locking up on-chain assets to mint these local currencies?
Yeah, and so the long-term answer to that is any token anything that can be any asset on the Agoric chain theoretically could be used for this. It will be up to governance to decide what assets are allowed as collateral in what we're calling the treasury to mint the currency against. And on launch, it will only be a few assets, right? So that list, we have a short list of assets that might be. You could imagine Ethereum coming over tokenized on the Agoric chain being a collateral asset there. Atoms could be a collateral asset there. We could use USDC, that sort of thing. And then as fiat on-ramps improve, and we're already having conversations in this regard. How could fiat be used in that way? I mean, obviously, it needs to be represented in the system to be usable in the application itself. But there's a lot of ways to do that. So, yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. So, basically, so it's almost like a MakerDAO model that's just natively implemented into Agoric itself. And I'm guessing it'll be all over collateralized as well, but all these figures will be basically determined through governance.
Yes. So that is a good explanation of it, and I think what that drives is that if you are a validator or a delegator in the Agoric system, you're not just backing the security of the chain itself, you're backing the security of the economy. And as a result, there are fees from those things that help make sure that that's a worthwhile proposition for you. So that in large part is a driver of what we're trying to do, is to say, how does the Agoric system grow as an economy, and not just, if you're a validator, how do you avoid just being compensated from either new issuance or transaction fees? Because neither one of those feels like it's directly tied to the success of the economy itself. And so how can you create a system where as a staker or validator, you really are securing not just the chain, but the economy?
Very interesting. And so would it be fair to sort of think about the AMM module also in a similar the AMM that you guys have put together in a similar way, where it's also going to be
Yes.
controlled by the Agoric validators and delegators?
Yes, and so controlled in the sense of there is the option for a protocol level fee that could then go fund validators and delegators. But the idea would be that it's not controlled in the sense that people could still permissionlessly add pairs the same way they can with a DEX that they're familiar with. But yeah, there would be a fee that could go to the protocol itself, or will. Yes.
Gotcha. That's very, very interesting. And this AMM you mentioned, it'll be very flexible. It's just not gonna it's not gonna be just a simple XYK a curve. You could do stable swaps. Then can we also assume that it'll have the flexibility of for example balancer that's available on Ethereum today?
I guess what I would say is we are watching all of the evolution indexes that's happening and deciding what the right model is. And I think, for example, balancer may or may not be the right model that we want for this particular AMM. But we're definitely assessing that, right? And not just the ones that have been in Ethereum for a while. There's AMMs launching in Cosmos. Obviously Uniswap v3 has some interesting functionality that we're looking at and trying to understand how would this affect things. So the goal though is that this is pluggable and upgradable, right? So it's not something that will launch and then suddenly be stagnant or obsolete in a month or in a week. It's something that can be upgradable in a way that makes sense and is gradual and works for the governance style of the treasury and of the Agoric chain. So a lot of that is what we're working through as we approach mainnet. And so there will be more details there.
Can you briefly then touch on like what then the use case and like what the utility of the Agoric token would be? Because there's like a ton more layers to it than I think I expected.
Yeah, so there's we have two primary tokens. We have the staking token, and then we have the stable local currency. Both of those are the protocol tokens for Agoric. The local currency is what you use to pay for transactions in, and it also will be the default price in the AMM. It will be the thing that we sort of, as a third-party developer, you can choose to denominate your services or products in whatever token you want, but we sort of expect that the default will probably be the stable local currency for most developers. And so that ends up being the medium of exchange in the system. And then the staking token really is about securing the chain, securing the economy, and there's not nearly enough time to really dig in here, but there will be additional mechanisms that tie the staking token to the local currency as well in a more direct way that we're excited to release when we're ready here.
Gotcha. And then on.
And I should mention, sorry,
Yeah.
we actually just agreed on the token name. So build is the staking token and run is the stable local currency. I've gotten so used to not being able to say the names, but I can say them now. So I need to do that.
So yeah, look forward to them build and run.
Build and run.
That's super exciting. And then and just to add, so and also build will also be governing the Agoric's economy. The entire not only protocol but like something protocol native applications that will be built in.
Yes, that's right.
Gotcha. It's we just dived into a bit of Agoric here, Agoric beta here. I definitely highly recommend all builders to check it out. My mind is already spinning about like thinking about like how this would very very differ from how Ethereum's DeFi ecosystem has grown up. So definitely highly recommend all builders to build on Agoric beta and check out how the build token will run. Do you have any words for non-technical community members? How can they get involved?
Yeah, I think that and I always say this, just start by joining the Discord. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I come primarily from the non-technical side of things, aside from some coding background when I was younger. But I think really not being afraid to dig into the concepts is the right way to understand the protocols that you're trying to understand. And I think there's a lot of language that makes this seem impenetrable, but it really isn't, and people will answer your questions. So come into Discord, ask questions, and start to understand. Build a point of view on how you think this ecosystem will evolve, and start espousing that. It depends on your goals here, but I would say start by joining the Discord and interacting. And maybe dig into some of the technical stuff if you can.
Awesome. Definitely. So join Discord is basically the big message here to all non-technical community members. And any last words to the general community validators or whomever you want to address this to? Like, I'm curious, like any last words before we wrap up today?
No, I think just to start with, for you guys, JK and Logan, I really appreciate you guys having us on, or me on, and being active in the community as well. And we're so excited for this testnet. And if you're part of the community, you're watching this, your input has been extremely helpful. And I guess all I would say is let's keep this going. And if you find that anything that we're doing isn't communicating well enough with you, let us know, and we'll try to maintain the standard that we've done so far. And I think that's it. There's a lot coming from Agoric this year. We've got a lot to build on a bunch of different threads, and so we just want to make sure that we're also staying engaged with the community. And so we really appreciate everyone else stepping up to help each other, helping us, asking us questions when they need it. And as long as we keep doing that, then I think that come mainnet, we're going to have a really exciting thing here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rowland, for taking your time to answer these wonderful questions. We'll make sure that they're well ready, available for everyone to view, and highly recommend everyone to keep your eyes on the Incentivized testnet, an Agoric beta, and then the upcoming mainnet, which will happen around this summer of this year. So yeah, with that being said, thank you, Rowland. We'll conclude today's AMA. But yeah, looking forward to talking again.
Thanks so much for having me.